warm welcome to our Technology Game Changer series on Sky's the Limit, exploring the advancement of aerospace technology in India. It's my absolute pleasure and a privilege to be hosting an eminent panel like you. I'm Avinash, one of the founders of Global Talent Exchange. We are a global platform mobilizing emerging tech talent from global tech hubs or skill-rich areas to areas with skill shortages, human cities, and working towards making life better across the world by accelerating, social, financial inclusion. It has also taken on with emerging as one of the largest technology hubs and companies in India chasing audacious goals. It brings emerging tech at the forefront. The idea of the series is, of course, to trigger an exchange of viewpoints amongst experts like yourselves and see how we are placed as a nation to seize the opportunity in each of these emerging tech areas. With aerospace, the industry has been growing steadily over the past few decades, both globally and in India. According to a report by Research and Markets, the global aerospace industry is expected to grow at a CAGR of 3.7% from 2021 to 2028, reaching a market size of close to about 400 plus billion by 2028. In India, the aerospace and defense sector is expected to reach a market size of 70 billion by 2029, according to a report by KPMG. Also, India is one of the fastest growing markets in the civil aviation, with the passenger traffic expected to grow at a CAGR of 10.5% from 2016 to 2040, according to a report by the IATA. The Indian Space Research Organization has launched more than 100 plus satellites in the past decade and plans to launch 10 to 12 satellites per year going forward. According to the Society of Indian Aerospace Technology and Industry, 2.5 lakh people with more than 800 companies operating in this sector. We see an overall, potential, massive potential of the aerospace industry in India. So let's understand from the experts here on the panel in terms of what these opportunities are, how we can seize these opportunities, and what are the challenges that come along with these opportunities, and how we can, as policymakers, industry leaders, and academia to come together and overcome some of these challenges. To lead this discussion, we have Professor Satya Chakravarthy. I mean, most of you know him, very well, but for the benefit of some of the people who are seeing him for the first time, Professor Satya is from the Department of Aerospace Engineering, IIT Madras. Professor Satya works in the areas of propulsion and combustion and research on different aspects of combustion and gas turbine, and rocket engines. He heads the National Center for Combustion Research and Development at IIT Madras, supported by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. Recently, Professor Satya is also heading the Center of Propulsion Technology, supported by the DRDO. He has over 80 peer-reviewed archival journals, publications to his credit, presented over 200 plus conference papers, and received over 6 awards, including the DRDO Academic Excellence Award. Additionally, Professor Satya is also an entrepreneur, an advisor, and is currently the co-founder of True Hyperloop, ePlane.ai, and Galaxy Eye, among several others. So before I hand it over to Professor, a gentle reminder, this is a closed room session, so you can really be vocal about what you say, and it will be attributed to you as an individual in case there's a challenge tagging your company's name and stuff like that. So we will, keep it brief in terms of the points, viewpoints that we want to kind of, because there's a lot to discuss. And if you have a specific point to make, please raise your hand and we will come to you. Professor, over to you.
Thanks so much, Avinash. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone. I think
Yes.
this is a very star-studded panel. I think GTX has done a good job trying to put together this panel of a lot of experienced as well as innovative people around in this, let's say, the chat room, if you want to call this. So what I would like to do is, I think we have actually also been given a set of questions that we should be discussing, and I will actually go over them in that particular sequence as well. But prior to that, we should probably have a quick round of introductions from everyone. A few housekeeping rules, just to keep the whole place, a freewheeling as well as not so, chaotic situation. I will call upon people to respond, but as I think Avinash said, if you have a point to make, you can actually raise your hand, and then I think there is a provision for you to raise your hand. So I will actually then call you so that we can actually talk when we are called upon. And I'm hoping that I'm not going to ignore anybody. Right. We have a large number of people, so which also means that we need to engage everyone. And each of us has tons of experience. I think a lot of people with lifetime of experience. So in the interest of having everyone heard, we don't need to necessarily have everyone answer every question, by the way, right? So that doesn't make sense. So I will actually call upon a few people to respond to a few points to begin with, but other people can actually raise their hands if they have to say anything. But whatever you say, if it's possible for us to actually keep it sweet and short and sweet, crisp, and just make the point in about a minute or two, right? And then we can move on. We'll come back. And obviously, many of these points are actually interrelated. It's not a crime for you to actually dial back to a previous question when I'm asking a new question. It's okay, right? So all of that stuff is part of the course. So we can do this in a very clean manner is what I think. So I think without further ado, I would like to actually have each of you go through a quick introduction of yourself, which is easier than us reading out reams of information that each of you actually are worthy of. That's the problem we have is we are basically letting you do the brief yourself rather than be struggling to actually be brief about some fairly large resumes that you have very rightfully earned. So let me actually call out people in the order in which you are showing up in my screen, which may not be the same as everybody else's, right? So since I'm actually moderating, I get the chance to call out people. Sorry about that, right? So let's just start with Mr. Arvindo Handa.
Good morning, everybody. I am Arvindo Handa. I'm ex-Air Force. I have about a cumulative experience of about 4 decades in the aviation. Then about in 2017-18, I shifted to civil aviation as one of the DGs. In fact, I am the founder of an organization called Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. So after working there for 5 years, then I became the chairman for ICAO with the regional office, which is in Bangkok. There is an accident investigation group. So I served as the chairperson for that group, and which I have just relinquished about a month back on 28th of February.
Right.
Delighted to be with the August panel.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Professor.
Group Captain Srivastava.
Good morning, everybody. I'm ex-Air Force again. Around 28 years I spent in Indian Air Force. Few of the assignments was Director Aircraft Modification at Air Headquarters. Then I was Chief Flight Test Engineer at AST, doing all aircraft evaluation, armament, EW and all. Then I was Head of Flight Simulation, CAE MACMET. Then 4 years I was with Honeywell. I was Program Manager for Airbus A380 Flight Management System. Then I short a spell with Vectra IT Solutions, where I interacted with a lot of companies presenting our company. Then I was took over as Chief Executive of Elbit Israel and HAL joint venture. So there we were with all multifunction displays, helmet mounted display, design development, flight simulation and all. After that, I took over as advisor aerospace and defense HCL Technologies and then Quest Global. So around, for nearly 5 decades experience.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Uma Maheshwar.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Great to be in this August panel. Briefly, I am the Chief Consulting Engineer for 700-member GE Aerospace Engineering India team based in Bangalore. We are involved in design and development of next generation aircraft propulsion systems, support of aircraft engine fleet, and development of customized digital and engineering software. I have over 30 plus years of experience in setting up and leading large engineering R&D organizations. 22 years in GE Aerospace. Prior to this, 8 years in Larsen & Toubro in AV engineering. So great to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Vignesh Santanam.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Professor Satya. So I'm Vignesh Santanam. I represent the World Economic Forum. I'm the India lead for aerospace and drones. So it's first of all, it's great to be part of such a star-studded panel, and happy to share my views going forward. But a little bit about me is I come with about 14 years of experience. It's a mix of technology, where I spent about 5 years in Wipro, 2 years in the maritime industry, also from a technology standpoint, and close to about 7 years now in the drone industry. I was also one of the founding members of the Drone Federation of India. I also led it in its formative years. And now here as World Economic Forum, I represent what is called the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where we're a platform for public-private partnership, more on a community level and not on a very grand level. We look at small communities of impact that work on technology which has social impact applications. So one of our flagship initiatives in India is called Medicine from the Sky, where we look at where we use drones and basically aerial systems to deliver medicines at far-flung areas. And one of our initiatives that's happening as we speak is in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. So happy to share some examples from there, cite some interesting cases as we progress in this discussion. So thank you, and good to be here.
Awesome. Dwarka.
Good morning, Professor, and thanks for inviting me for this forum. And indeed, it's a great opportunity to exchange with all of you. And probably it's the first time in an aerospace and defense panel I'm with somebody who's from World Economic Forum. Great to see you here as well. I've worked in aerospace industry for more than 2 decades, predominantly at Airbus, in the UK and France. I was also the CEO and president for the Airbus commercial aircraft in India. And I've been working on other areas like international cooperation for Airbus across Far East, India, and the Middle East as well, developing supply chain in these regions, and also working with the governments on developing the aerospace roadmaps in these countries as well. Currently, I am a strategic consultant. I'm outside of Airbus. I'm also an adjunct faculty at the Indian Institute of Science. I'm also a visiting faculty at the Indian Institute of Management as well, teaching, and I had an opportunity to set up an aerospace MBA at IIM Bangalore as well. So here I am. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Partha?
Thank you, Professor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Partha. I'm the commercial lead India for Lockheed Martin. So my domain mostly is into sourcing, supply chain for Lockheed, and I'm also taking care of the space domain inside Lockheed. I'm ex-Ministry of Commerce employee. I was in the Make in India team before this, taking care of oil and gas and defense. And before that, I was from the Ministry of Defense. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Excellent. Sashi?
Hi, good morning all. Very glad to be part of this eminent panel. I could see the diverse experience and as well as the depth of experience in each of the domains. Really fascinating, and I'm going to learn a lot in this next 2 hours. About me, I have about 22 years of experience in the aerospace domain, largely the commercial aerospace. Out of that, 20 years within the aero engines. So I had a privilege to work under leadership of Uma in GE Aviation. And after that, I was in Rolls-Royce. I was leading the setting up of the Rolls-Royce Engineering Center in Bangalore, and getting the Rolls-Royce Trent XWB program into India, just doing the major modification on the aero engines. I was also leading the external sort of connect for Rolls-Royce for over about 5 years. And I've switched over my domain from aero engines into aircraft systems. So currently I work for Collins Aerospace, which is one of the largest aircraft systems and technology providers in the domain. Just briefly, looking at what's happening, both from a technology investment in the commercial aerospace domain, as well as the kind of the growth, what we're talking about in the Indian commercial aerospace. I think it is really a fascinating time to be in aviation.
Great. Sashi, I think I need to claim credit for you being an alumnus of IIT Madras.
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
Captain Vishal Kanwar.
Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. I think a quick word about me. I have a long service in the Indian Navy. Served there for about 20 years plus, commanded 2 warships. I also had the privilege of commanding the Mauritius Coast Guard. Typically in Mauritius, the Coast Guard, the only maritime force is commanded by the naval officer. There, in fact, I was involved in one of the first exports of a Dornier aircraft from HAL to Mauritius. So Mauritius has its own maritime escort. It flies about 4 Dornier aircraft, all given by India, flown by Indian pilots. So great experience there on how to, do an exports under the line of credit and how India could be an export destination as well. After I left the Navy, I did a year's MBA and ISP, and for the last 5 years, I've been in PwC. I kind of created this aerospace defense and space practice with PwC, and being a consultant in this space, I can tell you that it's a absolutely growing practice. Just a consultancy space in aerospace has grown at about plus 25% plus CAGR. So that's the kind of, I keep telling people where auto industry was in India 20 years back, we are today. We had a steep emerging graph, and I think it's a blue ocean there. It's not you don't have to fight for anything. There are enough in most spaces available for consultancy. Within PwC, we work a lot with the Air Force, Navy, Army. We are doing a project right now with MOD on defense testing infrastructure scheme, where we're looking at aerospace industry, what to set up throughout the country, whether it's in UAV, aerospace, composites. I do a lot of work with HAL. We're right now creating a marketing strategy for some of the aircraft. Also, we looked at how ALH manufacturing could take place in a private domain. Of course, there are huge bottlenecks. We do a lot of work in counter-drone strategy. Counter-drone is globally PwC. We are doing a lot of work in oil refineries, critical infrastructure. I think that's a huge threat right now. We have how to have a defensive layer against drones. Currently, I'm engaged in a very marquee project. I'm supporting ISRO in creating the space strategy for the country for the next 10 years. And that's how I met Dr. Satya as well. So I think great to be here. This could have happened an opportune moment. I just had a call in the morning with the ISRO scientists. So to hear about how aerospace is going to shape up from all of you would really help me also to understand perspectives from such a diverse and, I would say, top of the line audience which we have here. Thank you for having me here. Look forward to this discussion.
You're on mute, Professor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I think I dropped it for a minute. Sorry about that. Yeah. Can we proceed to Arjun Das?
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me for this forum. My name is Arjun Das. In my past, I was with IBM. I used to head the Watson Group for AI for both defense and finance. Subsequently, I've been in the drone and aerospace area. Currently, I'm the CEO of B-Flights, which is into heavy lift drones. We work at payloads of 50 to 100 kilos, and we work with both defense as well as non-defense in the commercial airspaces. That's where we are into right now. Thank you.
Great. And last but not the least, definitely, Vipul. You just showed up last on my screen. That's the only reason.
No, that doesn't matter. I think with the name V coming in, I have been habitual of always called at the last in the class, so that's not a problem.
Right.
So yeah, thanks a lot everyone for having me on this elite panel. My name is Vipul. I am the co-founder and CEO for Aereo. Earlier we were known as Ara Unmanned Systems. I'm also one of the founding members of the Drone Federation of India. So at Aereo, we are basically operating in the commercial applications of drones. We develop complete end-to-end solutions wherein we manufacture drones which are made specifically for remote sensing applications. And also we have built our own data analytics pipeline, which monetizes this data and extracts some useful business insights for applications in mining, infrastructure, urban and rural development. We are one of the leading companies in this segment where we have worked for various enterprise as well as projects which are for public good. So for example, we are one of the largest contributor in the Swamitwa scheme of the government, where we have mapped close to 39,000 villages and roughly around 60 lakh acres of area for various state governments for land record applications. And for various private and public enterprises operating in the mining domain, we have covered more than 500 large size mines for various applications. So we are a 350 member team stationed out of Bangalore. We have started our journey in 2013 from IIT Kanpur. So I have a background in aerospace engineering. That's how I got fond of drones. And this is the emerging sector right now with a CAGR of more than 35%. So we believe that there is a lot of value and impact which the drones can bring to the society apart from being used in the defense applications. So we are more committed towards bringing those impacts in the country through indigenous technology development. At Aereo, we hold close to 14 patents. So while we are expanding on our operations and engineering, we have been also focusing a lot on IP creation within the domestic territory. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Vipul. So let's get started. So I think all of us understand what's going on in aerospace around the world as well as in India. India being no exception to the world developments, pretty much. Previously, it used to be that India was always lagging behind a bit, but I think we have now done a fast catch up. We are actually pretty much at the same level, if not, even ahead sometimes and so on. The canvas that we have is pretty vast, right? So we're starting with civil aviation. There is a huge military sector. Aerospace usually goes with defense. Plus, we also actually look at the space technology side of things and the emerging drone space and the eVTOLs, the engines, and the sustainability of those. A lot of things have to be covered, and we have large number of experts in the field right now. In fact, I think I was specifically asking the organizers to include some startups on drones, for example, because that's actually an emerging field that we need to recognize. And thanks for Vignesh to be also here talking about that from the World Economic Forum and so on. So it is a large canvas that we will have to, draw upon. So I think the way we are doing this is, let's actually call these different verticals, let's say civil aviation or military or engines or drones or eVTOLs or space, again, launch vehicles, satellites, all of these are different verticals. I think the questions that we are going to be discussing today are more cross-cutting horizontals, right? Things like what is the innovation quotient in these? What is the sustainability quotient in these? What's the manufacturing stuff? And what's India doing about it? And what's the global scenario? And what about the talent pool? So all of these things are essentially cross-cutting horizontal, layers that we will actually be peeling in this morning's interaction. And I think, as Avinash pointed out, this is sort of like a closed-door discussion, and it's not very often that we actually set aside 2 hours for doing something like this in our schedules, right? And it's not very often that we actually meet with a whole bunch of people of this kind of caliber in one place. So what I would like to do is to ask of you to freely discuss what you think is happening over here in the spirit of a discussion where we can actually take away from each other's experiences and outlook for what's happening going forward. So with those few words, I think the content that we are actually looking at has been evolved in the direction from what is the global outlook, what is the India specific outlook, and then specific aspects of what's emerging, like sustainability, innovation, manufacturing, and then getting into things like where is the talent pool and so on, right? So from that perspective, I'm going to, as I said before, I may not really call each one of you to actually answer each question. That could become very sort of very routine. Yeah, I will call upon a few people just to get the ball rolling. And anybody else who has to answer, who wants to say something, can actually put up their hands, and we will get them to talk. I think the first set of questions that we are looking at are primarily examining the current state of the Indian aerospace and defense ecosystem, challenges and opportunities. The questions that we have in front of us, roughly speaking, are how has Indian aerospace evolved over the past few years, and what were the key catalysts for growth? What are the existing hurdles facing acceleration at present? How does India measure up in to its global counterparts, right? So we can actually start this questions with, I think, Captain Vishal Kanwar, because he actually was effusive about the kind of growth that we are seeing here in aerospace, very similar to what automobile did about 20 years ago in India, right? Captain Vishal.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I would start with the perspective of what is really driving the growth today in aerospace and defense industry. And I have around 4 pillars to say that what is driving. The rising armed conflicts, which is leading to polarization globally, is really impacting. So some of our clients, say from South Korea, today are doing much more business in aerospace than the traditional clients, say from Europe or US. I'll give an example that, I mean, of course, I can't name the client because of confidentiality, but I can just broadly say the coffers are drying up, their production capability is not able to match up the requirements which are there, say, for example, in Ukraine war. Countries like East Europe, Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, Finland has just joined the NATO, 31st member of the NATO as on yesterday. So suddenly aerospace markets in, I would say, areas which were not really up to the mark, missile systems, drones, aircraft systems are suddenly, there's a huge demand which is being created because of rising armed conflicts. And there is polarization. I mean, at the end of the day, there is polarization happening, between the Western and the world which is being created. It may not be so explicit, but we in the business world, we can see. The second reason is, I would say, the increasing global defense spending. I'm of the firm opinion that if there is any advancements which take place in aerospace and cutting edge, it's the defense budgets which drive that advancement. We have Partha from Lockheed Martin here. We have G. Uma is here. Eventually, it's the defense budgets which kind of are driving a lot of R&D here. So what we have seen, if I give you the global increase in GDP in defense is about 2.4%. It was about between 2 to 1% GDP growth in defense, global defense spending before the Ukraine war happened. In the last year, it's gone up to 2.4%. That's the huge, and even if 0.1%, percent going up is huge, especially for countries like Japan, Germany, etc., who had a pacifist point of view on defense spending. Now, when I talk to my partners in PwC Germany or PwC Japan, they just want to talk about aerospace and defense. 3 years down the line back, when I was setting up this practice, they said, "Come on, let's talk of something which is non-defense. Let's not get into So there is a change in culture. There's a change in the way they're seeing the aerospace sector. I think the third shift which is happening is shifting towards localization and industrial development. Every country is moving towards, I mean, we call it Atmanirbharta, but what we are seeing is there is a general shift towards each country creating its own capabilities. And that's something which I've seen all aerospace and defense majors, and some of them in this call, understand. And we are helping them in, typically, how do you focus on localizing? Whether you talk of Middle East, India obviously leading the pack, or Southeast Asia, Gone are the days then where they would buy an equipment outright from abroad in the aerospace sector. So localization is the mantra, and any major aerospace company, unless it adapts to that, the businesses would have bottlenecks and challenges. I think the last point I want to say is that emerging technologies, R&D in emerging technologies, and we just did a kind of a strategy work on non-kinetic warfare for future of warfare in India for MOD. Emerging technologies around, especially AI/ML, blockchain, they are completely changing the way we're looking at aerospace sector. Like I mentioned, right now, we have something like software-defined radios. We are looking at software-defined satellites in future, as we interact with ISRO future satellites. So these technologies are having a huge impact on aerospace. Gone are the days when, that's our opinion, that F-35 aircraft that Lockheed has, you will have future aircraft, such huge expensive platforms. Perhaps the future platforms are more unmanned, more agile, more modular, more software oriented. And that's the way aerospace is changing in terms of how emerging technologies, just an example, is affecting. So whether it is AI/ML, big data, cloud, especially when you look at quantum is going to play a huge role, as we see in aerospace, whether it is communication or command control, etc. So these are the four areas which we see impacting the future of aerospace. Now, I also want to mention here R&D, especially one area, is where we as a country are specifically lacking. And when we look at the global R&D spend, we benchmarked R&D for one of the clients, USA, China, Japan, Germany. Obviously, they're leading the pack. But somehow in our country, whilst we will be the top 3 or 4 or 5 nations in, say, aerospace or maritime or land in terms of the militaries, but our R&D spends are very, very suboptimal. And there could be many reasons we can discuss as to what, but this is, I think, the biggest pain point. As a country, we don't really want to invest in R&D in the long term. Most of our R&D efforts, when we talk to companies, are market-driven, very short-sighted. And this is where I think the big boys have to come in as to how do we look at R&D. Of course, the other 4 main challenges we see in the aerospace industry in India, basis are one, obviously, high investment requirements, huge capex requirement. How do you address this? Access to capital is a huge requirement. Regulatory environment, yes, especially in the MOD, the new DAP, as you are aware, a lot of changes are happening. That's the second major challenge. And I think the third challenge is access to technology. Whilst we are leapfrogging in certain areas, and that's our point of view, which we created. India as a country can take leadership in emerging technologies, in those areas which are soft technologies. We feel that way. And the soft technologies, the softwares, the engineering services is what will rule the roast in aerospace in future. However, the moment you get into platform level, a simple thing like a gas turbine is something we have not been able to make in India as of now. So those are areas where we should invest, but I don't think, in our opinion, at least we are going to take leadership there. We will have to get into more collaborations, more JVs, etc. there. But it's the emerging technologies area which we should look at. Now, coming to specifically India, I give you a global picture. If you look at India, we feel that everybody knows the aerospace and defense budgets are growing up over a period of time. There is a larger chunk of the budget which is also coming from the emergency procurement as we speak now. So there's about 8% of CAGR which we see the way the budget is going, and especially the capital budget is increasing by 13%. The interesting part, what I want to mention is, if you look at the last 5 years historical account, India is going towards Atmanirbharta and localization. However, there are 3-4 areas where we are far from being localized. And I think the first, obviously, and all these 4 areas are in the aerospace domain. Whether these are aircraft, and the subcomponent and components of the aircraft, missile systems, which is another huge area, engines, again, mostly in the aircraft, even gas turbines, which are being used in warships, etc. And finally, the air defense capability. I think these are the 3-4 areas which we see. I don't think any system in India is more than 10 or 20% indigenous content. I mean, we challenge that there, but the indigenization content in terms of value, and I'm not talking in terms of the volume, I'm talking in terms of the value, is coming from abroad. And that's, I think these 3-4 areas is where we have to see how we can increase the IC content and go forward. Coming to Atmanirbharta, let me just quickly say that
I think I'm going to get to the Atmanirbharta as a separate round.
So this is broadly, Satya, as I see the aerospace sector.
That itself actually, painted a vast canvas right there.
So I just want to finish with one line. Satya, I just want to finish one line. As a consultant, when I look at any sector, I look at demand, ecosystem, and supply. When I look at aerospace, there is a huge demand, both from the military and the civil aviation today. Obviously, we are a fast-growing aviation market. We do a lot of work in MRO also. MRO business is also going in a big way. The ecosystem is promoting right now, but somehow the incentivization on fiscal and non-fiscal is lacking. The supply is woefully inadequate in aerospace. We are relying on one behemoth in India and HAL. So I'm not really talking about foreign OEMs setting base in it. Most of them have not really got into the entire value chain of aerospace as we see. So their over-reliance on one DPSU, I'm being very frank here, because we do a lot of work with HAL, etc. So whilst there is demand, the ecosystem is, I would say, 60-70% there. The supply says woefully inadequate. So this is broadly, if I would give you a 30,000 feet view, that's, we can dive deeper subsequently.
In fact, I was actually going to go to Group Captain Srivastava, but before that, I thought I will actually interlace that with Dwarka's comments before I go back to Captain Srivastava, the Group Captain Srivastava, because I just wanted to have a variation from two veterans, right? And so in between them, let's actually have somebody with a civilian career. Dwarka, can you?
Thank you, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give more from a civil aerospace twist, but I think I'll address the general one. I'll focus more on the Indian A&D ecosystem, pretty much on the challenges and opportunities, So I think if we look at pre-1995, the A&D ecosystem in India has been predominantly been on the defense, and very little on the civil aerospace activities, So essentially from the private sector, not many were there. I think the PSUs such as HAL, NAL, BEL, DRDO, ADA, and all they were leading the A&D, research, development, production of aircraft, and there were only small private players, probably MSMEs and more on the SMEs, they were participating, and there was not much of outsourcing, right? So in the last 15 years, the Indian aerospace has evolved multifold, both in the private sector as well as on the public sector. If you look at, what really changed, you look at the Indian aviation, around 2003 to 2007, we had a lot of airlines coming in. If you look at a big tranche of orders from Air India, the first orders, then we had Jet Airways, Air Deccan, Kingfisher, Indigo, SpiceJet, Jet. All of them made orders in these 4 years, and there was a lot of enthusiasm that there is going to be a big growth in the aerospace sector as well, as which will follow the aviation. And that's something which we are seeing now, like what we saw in 2005, around that period. Again, in around 2005, two industry sectors jumped into aerospace, in my opinion. One is IT sector, the other one, automotive sector. And I'll just explain. In year 2000, there was a lot of year 2000 Y2K issues. And just after that, IT industry found that they had a lot of engineers, from mechanical aerospace. And I still remember coming out of, mechanical engineering, and I went into software development, so, and then I moved over to aerospace, to come back, So I could see a lot of my colleagues at that time wanting to come back. And then what IT industry wanted to do is that use that opportunity, and they started the engineering services around 2000 and to early 2000, and they entered into aerospace. So we have a healthy engineering services, today in aerospace, that's on one side. On the other side, I still remember companies like Dynamatics, Aegis, Tatas, Mahindras, SimTools. A lot of these guys, they came and discussed with us with PowerPoint slides. They did not even have an aerospace factory. They didn't do anything. So they came and said, hey, we want to come in. All of them came from automotive industry, because there was a lull in the automotive industry. They saw a flurry of aircraft orders and they came in. So these two sectors really, started the growth in the Indian private sector. I'm not talking about the government one. But however, when you look at these companies, they all started like tier 2, tier 3s, and then slowly they moved up the value chain, graduated, to make major component assemblies and came in terms of Tatas. But other guys, they made big assemblies as well, and they are doing so. There are about 100 to 150 medium and large Indians, private companies which are on the aerospace supply chain in India. But if you're looking at the hurdles, facing the acceleration at present, even though these Indian companies, were working on the civil aerospace, none of them really have graduated into, tier 1 companies having design and build capability in-house, right? So because most of them are working on engineering services, if you go to engineering services company and ask them, do you have a design organization? They say, what do you mean? Because we have engineering services, but engineering services is not design. Design. And you ask them, who is the chief engineer? They said, what do you? We have a CTO. Okay, so that's the sort of thing. We faced that at that time, and I'm coaching with the companies now, and that's one of the challenges, right? So, and they work on areas which are detailed design, analysis, because that gives better profit rather than having to invest and work higher up the value chain. And that's one of the things. And secondly, another challenge is that, when there was this national aerospace program, I will not name the private company, a big conglomerate in India. When I asked them, the CEO, and he said, Varka, do you really think this will see the light at the end of the day? I can invest in water salination plants rather than actually working on the national aviation program, right? So, if I was in this position, I probably would have said exactly the same thing, or I would have had the apprehension, to want to invest on critical aerospace components, for example, engines or avionics, landing gear, because the players do not see whether there will be an opportunity for them to bid for projects. Forget alone winning, even opportunity to bid. So these are some of the hurdles. We'll look at that in the coming discussion as well. But comparing with the global counterparts, we are still at a nascent phase where we are growing the industry, especially on the private side. If you look at developed markets, whether it's France, UK, or US, it took about 25, 40 years to develop an aerospace supply chain. And most of this, as I said earlier, I think these are like heavy capital intensive industries. So there needs to be government programs driving the investments and the capability development. We will talk more about this in the next questions. Back to you, Professor Satya.
Sure. Thanks so much. Yeah, Group Captain Srivastava.
Yeah, I heard with interest. Now, let me give you a top-down approach. Where we are, all the time we have been talking of supply chain and entering all the fascinating scenario, but where is the point of entry? It is not there. I'll explain how. If you go top-down approach, after we find the concept and the design details and all, the OEMs are the one who manufacture or integrate the entire aircraft or aerospace systems, supported by tier 1. Tier 1 and OEMs are quite equivalent. They have their in-house design. In fact, say when I was at Honeywell, they used to have their own center of excellence, which keeps on developing the shell for and for adapting it to any ongoing system or OEM's requirement. They'll create a shell and then interface it and make it and deliver it to them. Now in India, if you see who are the OEMs, except for HAL, who also have been, there is no design expertise there. So it was the first, I think the first example, successful example has been the design development of LCA. I've been involved with LCA since '87. I have gone through the entire phase, through hiccups we have been going, but it is a success story. I'll tell you what is the biggest advantage. In Indian Air Force, we use systems of US origin, Europe, Russians, Israeli, and indigenous. Now, if you take any aircraft for which we are not the OEM, nobody will allow you to integrate any other system onto their aircraft. You have to take their clearance. To give you an example, I was just fascinated. See, we have bought the Rafale system now. Now, if we want to integrate any, say, Israeli missile onto that, or say ISRO has developed now the Navik and Gagan system. Now it is a totally different system in the sense it is not, the GPS receivers will not work here. The concept is totally different. Here there are 7 geosynchronous and geostationary satellites, and it is a regional navigation. So the receiver has to be customized. And this customization, how will you integrate into the aircraft for, say, navigation support? We started all this program after Kargil war when the GPS was denied to us. And to circumvent that, what we generally do is we only go with the help of inertial navigation. We go to an IP. Inertial navigation is very accurate over short times, but the errors starts exploding. So to carry out all our bombing missions, what we do is we choose an IP, intermediate point of salient landmass feature, very close to the final target. So we fly up to that, and all the accumulated errors in the kit are made to 0 by updating the kit. And from there, flying time to target is very small. So this is all we have been doing. Now with the advent of Navik and Gagan, we thought Gagan is an equivalent of LAS and VAS. And Navik is something like GPS, Galileo, or GLONASS, Baidu, and all that system. But it is a totally different system. And to integrate this, and generally in aircraft, we always use GPS with inertial navigation coupled through a Kalman filter to give the present estimate. Now in the Rafale itself, we will not be allowed to open up the entire architecture. Nowadays, all the aircrafts, they use integrated modular avionics, and you have to open up the whole lot. So the biggest advantage of LCA is, since it is produced indigenously, I have the opportunity and capability to integrate any system what I like. Here also, there are major systems, like the engine is G404 for the Mark 1 on 1A, and for Mark 2, it will be G414. Again, which is an American system. And I'm not sure if the CATSA is applied when you really need this aircraft. You will not be allowed to fly this. The whole fleet may get grounded. Similarly, the multimode radar, LRD and HL Hyderabad have been at it. Now we have developed some sort of an Uttam as a radar. Hopefully it becomes functional. So the biggest gain of any industry will be when you become the OEM or tier 1. In that, you will be able to guide and give directions to the design developments suiting your requirement. Otherwise, if you are dependent on anything else, you will be denied that opportunity. IT sector, we were saying that we came in a big way. I have been handling IT flight management system. You know, the system team still sits at Phoenix, Arizona, and only the low-level software design development and the VNV kind of work is outsourced. People may, and it is a very structured way of working. You pull out the software module, develop it, and put it in, and then VNV chap will do the validation requirement, verification requirement, because this is a requirement for certification. And otherwise, it will not get certified. But you ask any IT engineer in the industry as to what module they're working on, what is the system know-how, the answer will be a blank, big blank, because they don't know, they don't have the system overview. Similarly, I think flying is quite alien to a still large civilian population. To get through the nuances, like in USA, what happens is the entire focus, there is an agency called DARPA, Defense Requirement. So they think way beyond the present day requirements. They think beyond the military requirements, and they'll come out with areas where the design should be focused, where it should go. Then it will be assigned to some OEM. OEM and tier 1, they have a very close conversation as to how to develop the system. Now, HAL in that sense is not an OEM because they don't have the design capability. Fortunately for LCA, we created ADA, which was the coordinating agency between DRDO and the production agency like HAL. Another misconcept is that during design, development, technology demonstrator, and prototyping to a production is a totally different ballgame. The overlap between the two areas is minimal. In production, the focus is on jigs and fixtures and tooling, how to produce, and everything is frozen. And the TOT is done by DRDO or the designers to the production agency. That also they know what is to be shared, what not to be shared, including our own DRDO. They'll not share details with the DPSU. Only need basis it is shared. So I think what we lack is the system concept, or basically once you take the concept, then the aircraft requirements, which maps onto system requirements, then subsystems requirement, then item, and then we start working on different verticals. Verticals could be the software development, the electronic hardware development, mechanical and hydraulic systems, design of test benches and all. Then designing how will you verify and validate the concept and do the final acceptance, meeting the aircraft requirements. So this is a very structured way of working. And there are protocols, ARP 4754 and 67. They are there. Also now the areas where we have to look into is, see, the biggest problem in the hardware side is the obsolescence. The procurement of components and system becomes obsolete. Nowadays, the modular approach, similar like the IMA when I was talking of, integrated modular avionics, the interfaces are standardized and specified internationally, and we follow a standard interface. So within that module, whatever the design, you may change it, you can plug it as a module, and module to module replacement can be achieved. All such capabilities with whatever present scenario we of set of engineers we have, we don't have an insight into how to go into the architecture, how do you assign items or to these systems. We have been doing a tier 3 or tier 2 at the most, that kind of work as far as software is concerned. Similarly, the hardware side. As part of Mirage upgrade program, and we were trying to do reverse engineering on 40-watt cards for Mirage upgrade. Now there the problem is, once you come here and start looking out for the vendors who can fabricate the PCB, who can put the components there and then do certification testing. Testing is a very, very expensive task. Fortunately, Government of India has created a lot of testing centers like high voltage testing and temperature, thermal stresses, or you can hire out the agencies worldwide and get it tested. And then you will come to integration. But here the biggest problem has been the low volume manufacturing. No vendor is interested in producing some 20, 30 or 40 cards. over such an expensive and over time and run. They want some bulk orders. Now this can only happen in case you become a good tier 3 supplier and look to the demands globally, not only focused on India. And then only you will become viable. But how for getting certified or accepted by the world community as a tier 3 supplier, you have to do the certification like AS 9100 or some cert. You have to be necessarily certified so that people look at you. And there are agencies now, I think we need to focus at, currently we have a lot of talent in the lowest software development, VNV, and maybe the component procurement and supply chain and all that. At the lowest level, we must start. Here, the footprint is very large, and we can address a lot of commercial gain can be. Worldwide, anything may be happening, but who will give you opportunity to break through into the system and win a contract? It's very difficult to win a contract in global competition. Similarly, if you see the sectors, commercial sectors also, there is no point in going into or competing with worldwide where fierce competition is there. Regional transport, you will see Airbus A320 and 737. There is no, including Embraer is not able to penetrate into that market. Now, NAL had started this medium transport aircraft venture. And I think China has already captured the market there. So there is no point in venturing into something where you will have stiff competition with no background for you to penetrate into that.
I think I'm going to stop you there because I think we have to get other people in. But you touched upon a lot of things that I wanted to actually ask questions on.
Okay.
to a lot of people. So in fact, I think one of the first couple of comments that we have had so far, we're primarily towards the conventional large planes or the military planes. It's all in the aircraft sector, right? But there is an emerging, so for example, if I actually asked Vipul, right, are you an OEM, right? And he would actually say yes. And someone like Captain Srivastava would say, well, that's not an OEM that I was thinking about, right? So this is the, in fact, I remember, I think in 2018 or 2019, I was actually at the AWA Aviation Forum, and the CEO of Boeing was actually giving having a fireside chat, and he said, we are a 103-year-old company, and unfortunately for us, we have to think like a 100-year-old company as well as a 3-year-old company. That is the name of the game in aerospace today, right? So we need to actually look at what are the 3-year-olds doing as much as the 100-year-olds are doing, right? So that's something that I wanted to actually bring in Vignesh to see what he thinks about what he thinks is aerospace. Right.
Thank you, Professor Satya. So just before I kick off, I thought, three sort of terms that I will focus on is the drone and the aerospace sector, and from a predominantly civilian standpoint. So before I actually get to it, I'll just make a few comments on what some of the, speakers earlier spoke about. So to be honest, yes, while of course, the question that you posed, the dilemma that you posed about, OEM versus, the services side of things is still a very open-ended thing. But even today, if you see, India services sector contributes to about 53% of its output. So the gross value added by the services sector is still very high. So the question is, are we playing to our strengths? Okay. Point one is, there were references made to China. We say China is the world's factory and India is the world's office. So when it comes to India's position in the aerospace and the drone, the advanced air mobility market, where do we stand right now? My answer is fairly straightforward. Is that if some of the stats that came out about the CAGR of the aerospace sector growing by 26.6 earlier in the day, I can comfortably tell you that as on today, the drone sector is punching above its weight and hitting about 30 to 33%. Now there were a couple of interesting stats that came out from the FAA that by 2040 we will have around 400,000 unmanned vehicles in the sky, and there will be around, by the AIA, there will be about 280K jobs specifically in the US by 2035. Now, if India is going to be participative of this global phenomenon or this global emerging trend in unmanned systems, is that a good target or a bad target? I would say we definitely have to move fast. There have been some very interesting advancements from the regulatory landscape, for example, has been a very rapidly evolving one. We've seen about 2 to 3 changes happen in the last 6 years. And finally, we are perceiving what is called a rather free regime. So if that is the case, I really think we should ramp up our global dialogue. I mean, India needs to tell the world where it stands, what it has accomplished, what are the kind of projects that it is undertaking. So my colleague here, Vipul, briefly spoke about Swamitva, where he's one of the key players. That said, some of the unsaid things are, if it happens successfully in its complete glory, in the Swamitva scheme in its full glory, will probably be the greatest ever drone survey undertaken in history, after the great trigonometric survey in India that happened in the 30s. So these are some very interesting stats that we need to keep in the back of our minds and communicate with. Now, focusing on the sector at large, what is our greater purpose here? So when you look at drones and unmanned aerial mobility, in very simple terms, what we as the World Economic Forum do and what we have perceived is that a lot of this is looked at as an unproven business case. But with time, we are able to iron out these roughs and demonstrate that the per unit cost. For example, a question that we get posed every day is that why do I need to use a drone to fly medicine to the last mile when you have a guy going on a motorbike or somebody going on foot? It's going to be very cheap. Now, that is a very simplistic solution. I mean, argument, but it is something that we have to answer on a daily basis. If you look at the value that drones add on an incremental basis over a certain period of time, there is certainly a benefit. Now, if these benefits are to be realized, it has to be on an economic level. Now, money is what, of course, makes the world go round, and we need to definitely demonstrate that drones are a viable option from an economic standpoint. But there is a certain catalytic cost that is involved. Now, if you're going to use drones in a humanitarian cycle, for us to prove that over a period of 2 years, the cost, the price tag of our drone services that were used in in delivery of medicines was X, vis-a-vis the amount that you spend in terms of buying a car, buying a motorbike, salaries of people there, the out-of-pocket expenses of patients who come to your health centers, living in these undulating areas. What is that? So your cost of ownership of a drone is definitely more promising. And that said, it is also a futuristic solution. So if you look at a place like Arunachal Pradesh, for example, the only way out is drones, and this is a phenomenon across the northeastern parts of India. There is no two ways about it. Yes, there is a certain time window where where you have landslides and natural phenomena that completely inhibit travel. And if you have to deliver medicines and emergency supplies, this is the way forward. And these are also training wheels for advanced air mobility, for the transport of people, to to actually ensure that rural populations get the same level of lifestyle, or for that matter, even healthcare supplies amongst others, as what urban as in on par with the urban grade infrastructure. Now, another thing that I would like to touch upon is some of the supplementary sectors that the AIM industry comes with, and which we need to look at very, very significantly. They can be looked at as limitations, but they're also opportunities as large. One is the supplementary infrastructure. When you speak about drones and drone deliveries, it is not about getting from point A to point B alone. What is the supplementary solution around this? We need vertiports. To give you one example, is that when we flew our drones in Northeast, there were 2 to 3 health centers that were extremely, totally off the grid and unoperational purely because of connectivity. And once drones got there, we were actually able to bring these health centers back onto the grid. So there is a very strong play for infrastructure, and this is a very big facet of the infrastructure investment or the connectivity investment that India makes. And another point to note from an economic standpoint is that for every dollar we invest in connectivity or infra development, the output on the GDP is between $2.83 and $3.5. So this is definitely the way to go for us. This is a very futuristic way. It is a bellwether industry of sorts. If AAM and drones are able to demonstrate success, it also combines with other heavily regulated sectors. Aviation in itself is regulated. Healthcare is equally regulated. This is, sectors like this are a confluence of both. So if you're able to demonstrate the success of this early in a very difficult scenario, being able to navigate the regulatory landscape and also delivering the goods, I think India presents a very good use case for the rest of the world. Very, very simple terms is that based on some of the work that we've done in Telangana and Arunachal, we've also got outreach from the region. We've got inroads from the government of Nepal that is looking to replicate a very similar model. So again, as I said, as C4IR India, our focus is more around the economics, the business case of it, and the community impact that we create, focusing through these programs. Now, back on the infra, touching upon more on the infra side of things, is one, the ports and the vertiport systems that will be needed to house and to ensure seamless transport of traffic. Two is a very robust traffic management system that can integrate with the erstwhile ATC, that can communicate with our manned aviation, because we need to avoid the worst case scenario, which is a conflict of manned and the unmanned. Three is the technology maturity. I did see one of the introductions here, I think from a gentleman from Bumblebee who said that they're working on very heavy lift drones for about 200 kilos. To be very frank, and since you gave us permission to be woke on this discussion, is that this is probably the first time I'm hearing of an unmanned system carrying about 250, at least in India. If it is true, and if we are able to aggregate the supply side of it, then we're definitely solving a very big problem. Because if you look at it is a very simple case of milk runs. In very simple transport economics, the more your transport systems are in play, the more you monetize them. Likewise, in the case of drones, if you're able to deliver products at different places, or deliver more on the drone, or deliver things of high value, you're actually monetizing your drones. So if we have drones in the pipeline that are able to carry these kind of loads, we need to see these things at the fore, because the demand is definitely there. Finally is the ownership, again, the ownership of the catalytic cost. We hear a lot about Zipline doing a lot of work in Rwanda, but a lot of it happened from social impact funding. That also to an extent bore a catalytic cost. And to Rwanda back in the day, 2016, 2017 was also an open canvas of sorts, because there was the know-how around drone and drone regulations was not as high. So there were definitely means to navigate that to be able to solve the problem that was at hand, which was maternal mortality. But here, sitting in 2022, 2023, we are a very informed audience. And, we need to make sure that this is not a one-man solution. So, a community impact, or at least, in simple terms, there is a very esteemed group over here. Porting this into like a consortium for AAM is definitely a very interesting way forward as far as the drone sector is concerned. Three is, this is a sector that I can comfortably say, Vipul can endorse what I say, is that I think compared to hyper local startups and some of the others, this is a fairly underfunded sector given the kind of work that it is doing. Now a question that we need to ask is, why is that happening? Why isn't this is solving a greater purpose of connectivity, and we definitely need to explore why this is the case. And finally, the evolving regulatory landscape. Yes, we are currently on the drone rules 2022, which was the liberalized drone regime. But a point to note is this is also capped at 500 kilos, right? So what beyond this? I mean, we do have the MacBooks and the iPhones, but what about the iPads, which are going to carry, the equivalent of that, which is going to actually be carrying people, and especially in urban spaces. So
I can answer that. I think we need to get Bumblebee and also send. I think Arjun Das actually dropped out. Seems like so if he were around, I would probably keep my mouth shut. But since he's not there as a moderator, I should have kept my mouth shut as a moderator. But since he's not around, I can say that at Deepline also we are actually doing these 100 kg kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why we do that is because of the 500 kg cap that you mentioned. So the answer to that is, if you do a 500 kg total weight aircraft, and then you can challenge the government to actually relax it if you're able to safely operate it in green zones first and all that stuff, right? So just wanted to quickly bring in Vipul to respond to what he said before I go to Handa on the larger question of Atmanirbhar that we were talking about. Vipul, you will actually get a chance to talk about startups specifically a little later down the line. But what do you have to say about Vignesh's points?
While I totally agree with what Vignesh was telling about the potential of the drones, look at both the segment of applications, right? The defense as well as the civilian applications. So the turnout of the Azerbaijan-Armenia war was decided by which country had the most advanced drones and how well they used without mobilizing any infantry on the ground, right? If you look at also the way Ukraine-Russia war is panning out, the country which is having higher number of drones and have more tactical technology on those drones is basically being able to dominate over the other. Even in fact, they have larger infantry with them. So drones are definitely going to play a very impactful role on both the sides. So if you just look at the 2022 passenger numbers in India, there were about 123 million people who boarded aircrafts for various reasons, right? And if you look at just the Swamitva application, which Vignesh was talking about, it envisages to map all the 6.6 lakh villages in the country, which basically houses close to 1 billion people, right? So it's the billion people and their next 5 generations which are going to get impacted with the data which will be created using the drones, right? And that is happening at what a cost of less than 300 crores, which is slightly lesser than the most modern warfare aircraft, right? So that's the impact which we are talking about with respect to capital invested. And if you also look at the IP creation, India has been always a country which has followed a trend of skipping a generation in the technology. If you look at mobile technology, if you look at launch vehicles, satellite launch vehicles, we have skipped the generation. Just because we were devoid of these technologies and we didn't have access to them, we ended up creating something a generation ahead. Look at the fintech, which is currently enabling the entire economy in India. So I believe drones are just that generational skip, which can also take away a lot of load, which was earlier envisaged to be taken by the manned aircraft, whether it is commercial applications for inspection of mines, power grids, or even, let's say, high-rise infrastructure, or utilization in the rural areas for medicine from the sky or Swamitwa kind of scheme, or even doing eVTOLs. I mean, if you look at Udan scheme, the further precise version of Udan will be also the intra-city and intercity transportation medium, which can have more degree of freedom available to it to bypass the traffic issues, right? And that's where eVTOL comes into picture, and then a lot of investments are happening. And these technologies require a lot of time. You know, making an aircraft, designing an aircraft, one needs to have patience for a decade to be invested before you really come with a substantial solution. And a lot of ecosystem around it. For example, in India, we still don't have an airworthiness certification process for any civil aviation aircraft. And we are talking about how we can become the leaders in the aerospace and defense without any IP creation and ecosystem around validation of the design. We can't do anything. We can only become tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers of, let's say, manufactured components. That is what we are mostly doing. But in case of drones, the entry barriers are not as great as aircrafts. You can still create IP at a very, very small levels in very small companies and startups. So what this drone sector is suffering from right now is the huge lack of talent pool. That is the biggest problem at this point of time for India to take lead in this segment. I don't think there is any other problem or challenge which will divide India from taking a lead in this particular sector. We have the right kind of policy. We have the right kind of use cases which are happening. And also we have the right kind of market which is emerging. In India right now, it is expected that the drone market will become about a $11 billion market by 2028. It's not a small market. The global market is expected to become $80 billion market. So what is indeed needed is that a lot of folks who are seasoned in the aerospace, mainstream aerospace and defense industry should start looking at drone as an alternative, let's say, medium in the industry or category in the industry, which is more emerging, which is giving higher growth and will add a lot of strategic value to both the defense and civilian applications. And as Vignesh was pointing out, there is a lot of gap in the funding ecosystem right now. People are still not there. Venture capitals and investors are still doesn't understand the long gestation period cycles of such kind of high IP intense activities, right? So because if you make drones, maybe your cycle of development would be 3 years to make a substantial product. But if you make aircraft, it is 10 years. But even then, the venture capitals are not really willing to invest into a 3-year, 4-year development cycle. They want results over 6 months. And that's why they end up even creating startups which are not sustainable. And if you look at the drone segment, majority of startups in the drone segment are very sustainable and very profitable at this point of time, just because they are bringing some reasonable impact by whether defense or a homeland security. And the most important part is to understand the strategic benefit which the country is going to get. It's not only about the return on investment, or it's not only about the number of jobs created, or it's not only about that how much IP is created. It's about what strategic advantage is brought to the country, right? So if you look at the procurements which are happening in defense, more than 2,000 crores worth of drones were procured under emergency procurement process, just because there is a huge strategic advantage to the forces which are there on the border at different geographies, right? So my concluding remarks on this is that this is a sector which has been missing the required attention from the mainstream civil aviation experts. So I think it's time that the experts which are operating in the mainstream civil aviation can look at dedicating some of their effort and time on this sector because it gives faster gestation period and higher growth opportunities. Yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get back to Handa. I think he's been wanting to say things right from the time when we were talking about the global and India specific scenarios. We wanted to slip into the Atmanirbhar question, right? I think we were mainly talking about the global scenario in the Indian context, what was lacking, and so on. When I think I called upon Vignesh to talk about like the new age industry called drones, and Vipul rightly pointed out that Indians tend to skip a generation. So if you're actually agonizing that we are actually missing out on the planes, forget about it. Just start with the drones and then go up the ladder from the drones back to the planes and become the OEMs of the world, right? So I think it's a completely refreshing thought that someone as young as Vipul would come up with as what I think. So yeah, in that context, Handa. You're muted. You're muted. Please, can you unmute yourself? Handa, you're
on mute. You're on mute.
Can you unmute yourself? Yes,
yeah,
please. Yeah.
I have done it. Yeah, Professor, I have been listening very diligently, so I have made few sheets. So I'll go not in the fashion in which you went, but I'll start addressing backwards. So I'll start with Vipul. Vipul has said very right thing that, first of all, I wanted to end or I wanted to start with this thing is, this session is for highlighting the problems or for finding the solution. I thought when I was becoming a part of it, every one of us knows which are the problems which plague the aerospace sector, whether it is defense sector, whether it is civil aviation sector, whether it is drone sector. So all of us are very well aware. So I thought that we are putting our heads together to make some approach paper or something like that, where we can put it up to the ears which can hear.
Yeah, it's about time we turn
when I joined the session, my thing was that all of us, to be very frank, whether it is 50 years experience or 10 years experience, we are all aware that what ails the system. Anyway, so we'll go down to the end. Maybe after this chat is over, we'll sit together and whatever was in my mind, we'll work on that. Now, coming down to Vipul and Vignesh, probably they may not be aware that I was an active part of 2.0, drones 2.0, which our face was Ambar Dubey. So they may be knowing, and Samit was there in their part. Vipul and Samit are very good friends, I know. So he can speak to Samit and ask about Handa. So we, as far as the regulatory part is concerned, which Captain Vishal made it out, I am not in agreement with Captain Vishal. I have been a part of the government for 5 years as a DG, as a Director General, and we have seen, as far as civil aviation is concerned, I can tell you the speed at which the things are changing. The speed at which the Aircraft Act was amended, the speed at which the AIB rules were formulated, the speed at which the drones 2.0, I remember the last date was probably 30th September or whatever. It came about and we worked overnight. I was a part of that team. Amber was a part because Amber was doing the negotiations and whatever was taking up from the PMO with Mandhar and party. But let me tell you one thing, that the regulatory system is not to be blamed. Now, whatever the industry people are wanting, whether it is commerce, whether it is even if it is the foreign trade, he'll be aware that there was one line which was done at the expense of antagonizing a very important market. Vipul will agree with me that it was there that the import is prohibited. This word was used. Am I right, Vipul? So the government has gone to that extent. The government has gone to that extent. So as far as regulatory part is concerned, I am not in agreement. It is we need to pitch up. It is the think tanks, they have to put their heads together and make a pitch at a level where they are heard. By cribbing that it is not working, it is not going to help.
I think let's just move on. I think you made the point. Yeah.
Yeah. The second is coming down to Vipul. I am in agreement with you with Vipul that there is a vertical in DGCA that is called AED, Aeronautical Engineering Department. It is defunct right from the day it was conceived. But fortunately, now Group Captain Pradeep Srivastava will agree with me that the counterpart in military, that is Semilac, it is much more vibrant. So we need to attack that part. That the AED department of DGCA is I won't say incapable. I would say they are not capable of doing a certification of a drone. Leave alone an aircraft. Nothing. I have been in that system for 5 years, but I was a DG. So if you read our reports, accident investigation reports, which we have done in the last 5 years, we have been telling this, that DGCA guys have to wake up. They have to upskill themselves. The guy he just goes for a UPSC interviews, comes back from there selected, and he becomes an aeronautical expert. Unfortunately, it is true. It is true. So
well, I have to actually infuse the same level of enthusiasm that you just exuded about the drone rules and the regulations just a minute back on the AED in DGCA, that the younger ones over there are actually well educated, by the way.
No, they are engineers. All of them are engineers. They need to be exposed. They need to be sent to Airbus. They need to be sent to Boeing. They need to know how any component is certified. I'm very sorry to say, none of them know what is hot and humidity trials, which AST.
I think if you get into actually berating the DGCA, it'll spend the next 2 hours. That's not the right thing to do.
Sorry?
You spend the next 2 hours berating the DGCA. That's not.
No. I'll not berate. I just wanted to tell him.
I thought you were trying to find solution.
Okay. Coming back to Vignesh, that the funding is not available. Government is not going to give funding, sweetheart. The way the Air India has been, I would say, privatized, government is not going to do the funding. But in emergency, yesterday, I think people must have come to know, yesterday the PLI, the first phase was distributed yesterday. Am I right, people? So this particular PLI was started during COVID, and it has taken about a year because, again, the Ministry of Civil Aviation may recommend PLI to be given to the startup, but then it has to go through Ministry of Commerce, then it has to go to, ultimately it has to go to Ministry of Finance. But it has come through yesterday. It has come through yesterday. But we have to stand on our feet. We have to stand on our feet. Coming down to the best thing which Dwarka said. I am in absolute agreement with what Mr. Dwarka said. I'm meeting him for the first time, or I'm seeing him for the first time. But whatever he said is true. Whatever our people at Bangalore or Hyderabad are doing, it is the engineering services. It is an IT related services of aeronautics. It is not the design. It is not the design of aeronautics. It is not the design of aeronautics. And we are way behind in manufacturing. Now, of course, we are coming up. Then that TASL is coming up with something. Okay, cargo door will be made or something will be made.
No. They are making a full 12-seater pilot.
Yeah, no. I believe the last
full.
I'll come to it, Professor Satya, for sure.
So what I intend is that whenever if India is a big market in the next 10 years, we are going to import say 1,000 aircraft, whether it is Akasa or Air India, we need to leverage. There was an offset clause in defense contracts. We need to put that offset.
I wanted to ask the panel one central question, right? When is it that we think we will actually be making full-fledged civilian commercial aircraft?
I'm coming down to that. I'm coming down to that.
How much time do you have?
So whenever we have from civil aviation, we have been telling the Indigo and others that, because I will tell you how. When any crash takes place, we need to go to the FDR to analyze. You will be shocked to know that we do not have even sophisticated FDR labs. Even the Calicut crash, which I investigated, which happened in August 20, we had to go to USA. We had to go to USA. So that is the state. Our airliners, they have bought 200 aircraft. Now Tata is going to buy 500 more aircraft. But why can't we leverage this thing? Why can't we arm twist them to set up a center and give us a TOT or make a JV? And that is how we'll work it. That is how our young engineers from IIT and other good institutions will work on. And coming down to manufacturing, we all know now for the last 10 odd years or whatever Tatas have done, basically it's Tatas. They are only getting those subcontracts of with whether it's Boeing or whether it's with Airbus. This is one issue that at least I say that it is not the design of any avionics component. It is not the design. We are making it, yes, certainly. And coming down to capital. Now, I was reading in the newspaper that yesterday our present defense secretary said that 2% of the GDP is good enough for our military forces. I'm surprised. So we all people who are in this forum, and we should put our heads together and suggest to the government that, okay, if you cut down that money, There'll be no spend on R&D. There'll be no spend on R&D. There'll be no spend on innovation. There'll be no spend on talent pool acquisition. So these are the things. And the last thing is, gentlemen, we are having an MRO. I just got an invite yesterday from an MRO. They are having a second conference in MRO. So all of you who are interested, I will put in a word to Bharat Malkani and party, because it's in Delhi on 22nd. Its entry is for free. That we will ensure.
Yeah.
But let's our guys who are in this sector, who have ample experience, let them come together and let's start incubating all those small things towards MRO, and so that ultimately maybe 10 years, 20 years down the line, we have something to I would say that it is ours.
Can I bring
I'm
in,
done, Professor.
Yeah.
I'm
Can
done.
I bring Partha in for what do you think is to be done on the Atmanirbhar part?
Yeah, thanks, Professor. I think this is one of the most misunderstood, I should say, word ever I have seen. Atmanirbhar doesn't mean closing your ports and everything and take out a big negative list and okay, now on everything will be made in India. Had it been true, so big companies like us, we would have never set up manufacturing units in all parts of the world, rather 60 countries. We should have stick to United States at that time. So hard lessons learned. I know it's more geopolitical driven than economic driven. So we should think about what's the economical impact of it when we do such thing. I understand the self-sufficiency in the on the context of defense. When you are seeing such a big shift from United States to maybe a second front of China, Russia together, maybe India and Southeast Asia, and that's how all this thing coming up. One more thing is that if you see the value chain part of it, Mr. Handa's recommendation that how we should find a solution. The solution is we manufacture C-130J empennages in India. Airbus manufactures a couple of big parts in India. Boeing is making the huge fuselage of Apache in India, the structures in India. So if they are doing it in India, they have, and this is a single source. Mind it, this is a single source. GE LEAP engine is there. Exactly, yes. GE, I was coming to GE example as well. So all these things are getting manufactured in India. Mind it, this is a single source again. So anything stops here, stops the main production everywhere in the world. So if we are manufacturing it here, how is that beneficial to us? I'll be very open that we have a cost margin. We have a cost margin manufacturing it here. We have a benefit manufacturing it here, and it's for everybody else, all the foreign OEMs. So Atmanirbhar has to be thought again. I think it is more of opening our doors to exports, knocking the doors of foreign, I should say, land and see how we can supply to them, and also making it more, I should say, economical. That's what I believe is more Atmanirbharta, where you built up the talent, built up the skills, and can produce something which the world comes and asks it from you. Over to you, Professor.
Well put, because I think last year's data was that we had 20,000 crores of defense exports, of which more than 60% was coming from the private sector. Right, so we are actually looking like a defense exporting country now, right? Before I want to switch gears towards innovation, where I would like to draw upon Uma, Sashi, and I think Arjun keeps coming back and forth, in and out. But just before I do that, I want to have one last from Dwarka before we switch gears to innovation. Dwarka, I think you wanted to say something. You're mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, that's been the challenge. So on the Atmanirbhar, I think there are different views of looking at it, and quite often, people go down the road of, putting offsets and trying to see that offset, should be. Personally, I actually don't think offset is the right thing, because if companies in India try to look at offset and then put their strategy, that's the wrong thing. And offset never ever had sustainable development in any part of the world. That's in my opinion. However, cooperation strategies, Mr. Huda was saying, those types of things, can be slightly different, so because Airbus or Boeing, when they sell to India in the civil aviation, there is absolutely zero offset. Because it's all private companies, but they can have cooperation strategies like they did do in other parts of the world. But coming back to the Atmanirbhar, some of the initiatives which the government has done, if I take Make in India as part of the Atmanirbhar, has actually paid dividends. If you look at the Buy and Make in India, as you alluded to, Professor Satya, the Avro replacement C295, is really now brought the complete aircraft to be, manufactured in India by the Tatas. And of course, this is not design. It's not designed. It's because no foreign OEMs is willing to give their crown jewels, here. But this is developing also the aerospace ecosystem in the country. If it is rightly used by Tatas, then it could really help. That's gone on a long way. But on the other hand, there are many other initiatives which the government has brought in my opinion. I think we are now working with the 2 defense corridors. I'm supporting one of them, and there. Clearly, what we are looking at is that how do we really support MSMEs? Because for global OEMs on the civil side, the big guys, they jump in, they are able to get some benefits as well, but some MSMEs. But here, if you look at the new policies, which has been brought in, and this has, several, things which come in as well. One, you've seen that there are lots of initiatives coming from government on this Make 1, Make 2, Make 3, and these things are really encouraging people to, one, do investments in design and development, because they're willing to fund the prototype, or do the development, but as long as there is enough Indian content, 50% or more, that government is willing to purchase. So these types of initiatives definitely will help in moving forward, especially the MSMEs, in my opinion. And then if you look at also the IP ownership, which is extremely important, if we want to move forward, there are some initiatives from the government on the 25% defense R&D budget, to be developed, given to the industry or through SPVs as well. These things will go a long way to really look at it. Even though I see that what my earlier speaker said about embargo probably may not be the way. In some areas, I think what industry is asking for, we did recently an interview with about 300 companies. What they are asking for is that we need to know whatever we are investing, there will be a business, to do that. And when we gave the feedback to the government, this was one of the initiatives which we said. So even though there are several initiatives, what I would say in terms of solution is that we need a national aerospace policy clearly identifying the gaps. And then when we talk to whether it is Airbus or Boeing, or whether internally to the universities or whatever, then we know what the critical gaps are, the technology areas, and we need to drive the development accordingly. I've seen this type of national aerospace policy in Malaysia and in Korea as well, driving that. And they go to companies like Airbus, if there is a offset, for example, to say, I want this, and then, rather than saying, I want three.
There are too many hands here. I'm going to stop, right?
Yeah. All right.
So I'm going to stop and then just completely switch gears, right? No, sorry, guys. I can't, have all the hands. I think Partha did not speak enough. Maybe just give him one chance before we actually do the innovation part, right? So let's actually look forward looking, right? So it's trying to correct all the wrongs.
Sorry, can I speak one line? Allow me to speak just one line for Mr. Dwarka? Just one line. I just want to know which directorate or which department or which ministry is going to make national aerospace policy, because
that's a question that's a question I wanted to ask and actually say.
Because in 2016, civil aviation made a national civil aviation policy 2016.
No.
But
okay.
Not,
Point made. I think the point is we are divided on military and civilian lines, right? So who actually makes aerospace policy? So what we really need is actually more like an aerospace commission, like the space commission, right? So that's a thing that, yeah. Okay, I think Partha.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't stop my hand going up when I heard offsets from Dwarka. So first and foremost, offsets has done wonders in this country. What we see in defense exports, a lot to be credited to offsets, but it has been mishandled by 4 to 5 people who are incapable, sitting in a very simple office called Defense Offset Management Wing. When you are buying $100 million equipment, you make a huge panel of 100 people to scrutinize it, negotiate it, and then buy it over many years. When you're getting $100 million, you make 5 people. Out of them, only one deals with that 100 million, with his own whims and fancies about interpreting the law, which is very sad. So I've seen only one country till now in the world which is not bothered about taking money, but is bothered about giving money. So that's very sad about it. Offsets in Israel and in Canada, in Saudi, in South Korea has done a great thing. We should compare them. We should compare the multipliers and then come back. Quick question, quick answer to the designing part. F-35, the most advanced fighter jet in the world, most of the designing part are done in India. It was a surprise to me also when I started visiting those. I cannot disclose the name of the company.
You will hear more of that from Uma and Sashi immediately, I think. Right?
I know.
How much of design happens? How much of design?
Yeah, a lot of design. A lot happens in India, sir. A lot happens. A lot happens here.
Yeah. Among all the things Captain Vishal said, the only thing I disagreed was a simple gas turbine, right? Sorry, you think gas turbine is not so simple.
Yeah, it's not so simple.
Yeah, just one line from us, right?
No, let's just no. Sorry, gentlemen. Gentlemen. We need to have Uma and Sashi, heard.
Okay.
And Arjun is in and now.
Just last point on the coordination part of what you are saying between DGCA. So you make a law about industry, you don't involve DPIIT or Ministry of Commerce. You make a law about the commercial aviation, you don't involve DGCA.
I think the answer
that's something
the answer for a very long time since about the 70s is an aerospace commission. That's what I think it has to be. Uma, we want to specifically ask you a question about sustainability in aviation. I think that's a hot topic, right? I think you can probably start with that. I mean, by getting into sustainability, I'm essentially looking at all the innovation that is expected to happen in the near future. One of them is the hardware side, the other one is the software side. I think Captain Vishal pointed out that we are actually good on soft stuff, right, where the AIML part would actually be useful and so on. So maybe Sashi can pick up on that, and if Arjun is back, and we will probably get him to talk a little bit as well. Yeah, Uma, please.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating discussion anytime we talk about, this Atmanirbhar. So I want to put a few things. The future of aerospace is around sustainability. I'll come to the specific technologies and the innovation and how India can be not just the player, but the leader in a movement. But I want to just, before I get into it, it's important to understand, where we are in this whole process. Right, we are all having a fascinating discussion on, why are we here, right? We need this, we need that, and we're all pointing, all the gaps. I just want to tell that we are here because of the systems and processes and the structure that we have created several years ago, which really resulted us in where we are today. So, for example, we were very happy to have services, right? Engineering services. And who got into engineering services? All the software companies. And then we say, why we do not have a design innovation capability? Because that's not what we have aspired. So if we have to be really the innovation powerhouse in the aerospace, we need to think of systems and processes and the structure which would enable us to get to the next level. The mindset of services is really the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest barrier. because we are very happy to serve the services than actually be the leader who can change the game and the thought leaders who can, create the future. So that being the larger point, this is around innovation. That's exactly the mindset that we need. We all know that the future of aerospace is around, let's say, sustainability. And exactly, I see the opportunities and the challenges that we have today are very similar to what the aerospace industry had when Wright brothers invented the first flight. Yeah, nobody knew, what's the path ahead. We just have some simple means of flying. We are exactly at the same point. We have huge challenges, and then there are disruptive technologies. For example, the future of aerospace could be around using hydrogen as a fuel, hydrogen combustion, or sustainable aviation fuel, or hybrid electric propulsion, or totally different architectures, which means the propulsion systems would look different, the aircraft would look different. With all that as a background of design engineering, if you also look at from the supply chain, there's a big disruption because of sustainability. No more it would be viable for organizations to have raw material in one country, do some operations, manufacturing operations another country, and do in 10 different countries from cost standpoint, because that's not a sustainable model. Sustainable in terms of environmental sustainable model. Now, it may be sustainable from a cost advantage. So there will be a disruption in supply chain because of sustainability. So it's a huge theme. What I would think is we need a clear vision. 30 years from now, 25 years from now, how we as a country would play. And that's what we really lack. We always react and we say, hey, we need this policy, we need that policy. 30 years from now, I would ask, whether the startups would be relevant, or will there be a different business model of doing innovation? So we need to really think the way of innovation, the vehicle for innovation could be different. And then the larger question I would say is, can we imagine, in the Fortune 100 aerospace defense companies, can India have at least 5 to 10 companies? There are 10,000 startups just in defense sector. How many of these companies really have global orders, right? So we are the victim of our own mindset and thought process. And I think the larger point I want to make is sky is really the limit, literally, in terms of innovation and the opportunity. We just need to think big, and we must have the policies and all the actions together in coordination, and we will achieve our goal.
Very specific questions, Uma. I think everybody expects you to answer. All right. When can we get the first hydrogen combustion gas turbine going, and or when do you think hybrid electric aircraft will be flying?
Yeah, no, great question. So I will not be an astrologer here. We have programs and we have deadlines. So
we don't want to counter astrology here.
Yes, I'm an engineer here. So,
exactly.
There is a prediction that, Satya, that by 2030 to 2035, we are talking about 10 to 15 years max. That the airlines will start commercial operation hybrid electric aircraft. So you would see in next couple of years that there is a real demonstration of the flight test. So on the hybrid electric propulsion, we see various players. The second thing is on the hybrid hydrogen propulsion. There's a huge improvement in terms of fundamentally improving the technology. So again, I would say around 2035 time frame, 10 to 15 years, we should be really seeing this disruption. It's a must. There's no other option for aerospace industry because we have zero, the goals on the sustainability. So it is a must, and we should see this in the next 10 to 15 years, both on hydrogen propulsion.
I think the first time I offered a course on electric aircraft, there was a German who took that class in IIT Madras, and he had actually come to India from Germany by road instead of by air, right? Just want to give Vipul a chance before he leaves. I think he has a hot stop at 10:45 is what he has texted. Vipul, I think, please tell us, I think Uma actually kind of challenged you, saying that would startups be the viable option 30 years from now, right? Please tell me.
Okay, so no, I mean, I think startups have been known to take up challenges which society always felt cannot be solved. And they have the disruptors of various economic activities which have been happening in the country. Look at fintech, look at telecommunication. It was startups who really took the challenge of doing a generation shift, which we wanted. So I think in the aerospace and defense sector, it is very important that we should have complete ownership of IP. And I believe it's the youngsters who will be able to do that way better than the large legacy organizations because of the way the agility is required in terms of innovation. And I believe also that the startups can really solve some of the tough problems, not only with respect to the drone ecosystem, but also for the mainstream aerospace and defense. If you look at some of the counter drone technologies which are being developed, some of the modern day radars which are being developed, it's some or the other way the startups which are emerging. In fact, in the drone ecosystem, startups have been able to do quite well, because when I was referring to that 2,000 crore worth of cumulative orders which were placed, all of them are startups which have supplied various types of drone related technologies to defense. And if you look at also the applications which are happening on the civilian front, more than 80% of the products and the technologies which are being used are developed in India. So it means that India is taking a leap in terms of creation of the technology. However, what I feel is that which is missing, which also answers one of Uma's question or point, is that have we started exporting? No, we didn't. The reason being is that there is a certain maturity in the quality, global and also thought process which is required for that global market venture. And that is where I feel that more matured experts from the industry can maybe choose to work with startups and take that 0 to 1 journey stage and transform into 1 to N journey, which is very, very necessary here. So, and as we were talking about the capital deficiency, we definitely don't expect government to chip in any kind of money. They have done enough for the policy reforms which we needed. I think it is up to us to create and it is up to us to scale. But for scale up, any kind of scale up, you need capital. And that's where the mainstream industry may like to venture into this sector and become part of it by collaboration with the startup and help them scale up with their global presence. So companies like Lockheed, Airbus, they already have programs to partner with startup. Maybe they just need to calibrate a little bit more and ensure that their global presence can be leveraged by the startups which are disrupting the sector with technology creation. So that will be a very good step towards ensuring that we are able to create products, and also not only for the domestic market, for the international market eventually. And I believe with the collaboration which I am proposing between the mainstream conventional players as well as the budding startup, the whole journey can be accelerated from a decade to less than half a decade.
Hello.
Yeah. Those are my points.
Yeah. Can you I think highlight about the human talent deficit that you were talking about a while ago?
Yeah, so I think the major reason behind the human talent deficiency is can be reasoned for a couple of there are a couple of reasons why it exists. One is that the academia and the industry is not aligned at all. If you look at the courses which are being taught for in the academia, especially aerospace related courses, they are not at all aligned with what industry needs. The fundamental knowledge base of aircraft design, engineering.
That's a direct stab at me. Okay, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, at least at this point of time, I see that there are a lot of extracurricular activity one needs to do before they become ready for the industry. Correct. And second thing is, I believe that if there is so much importance for the aerospace and defense and also the drone ecosystem, I believe it is the responsibility of the industry players to also offer compensations as good as the financial sector, so that people can choose this as a career path if they are talented, rather than going for BCGs of the world for their placements. Right, that is what happens in most of the premier institutes. People run for higher pay packages because the core companies are not yet able to match to the payments, the compensations which, let's say, non-core companies are offering. And the third most important part is the creation of IP. Right now, as a country, we don't have much value for the IP which is being created in the domestic geography, whether it is in the form of the speed, the time it takes to get IP registered, and the value which is provided to the IP in the public markets. It's missing. So government needs to endorse the IP creation. Maybe another approach could be just by the way PLI scheme was made to endorse or promote the manufacturing. there can be another, it's a similar incentive scheme called the design linked incentive, DLI, to promote the creation within the country. And hence younger generations, academic institutions would have more incentive. And last but not the least, this could become a controversial input, but since we have decided to be very open on this forum, I believe that the entire process of funding the research studies have to really be restructured from bottom up level, where we feel that public money should not be used to fund the research scholars in the country. It should be industries funding, which should go for solving some specific problem in a time bound manner. That will also solve a lot of problem of talent pool alignment with the industry's requirement, because most of the time I have found researchers working on the goal of publishing papers but not solving problems.
Got it. I don't know what's so controversial about what you said, particularly in this forum. I think if you were speaking in a university, you may get into trouble. Good. Thanks so much. I think we want to spend the last 5 minutes listening to Sashi at least. He's been extremely patient and silent.
I'm really listening. Actually, there's the varieties of conversations on the different areas. Like the drone is something which I'm getting into more recently, and it's a fascinating area. Kind of the use cases, right? The social use cases they are solving is really great, amazing. Just 3 points I want to kind of talk about. Right, Uma talked a lot about the sustainability. There's another element of sustainability, which broader college globally, what we are looking at. Is on the structures, the innovation on the structures, right? And so there's a lot of focus right now, at least in the US, with the NASA consortium, where Boeing is coming, Lockheed and Collins, and so all of us involved in looking at what is the next generation composites and how do we really produce in a high mass scale, right? And so we are actively looking at thermoplastics as one of the sustainable composites we are looking at seriously. And again, it's not new to the industry. It's there for over the decade, but we are looking at making the large structures using thermoplastics as an area we are looking at. The other one is an additive, right? And that additive is there over the time, but the getting additive into the mainstream is still, it's taking long time. So we are looking at how do we accelerate this. One of the challenges that we can make any parts, but can we really understand the characterization of the part, and can we qualify and certify the additively made parts is a major challenge. So I see there's a lot of innovation around the structural components in the aircraft. At least the commercial aircraft is currently being invested on part of the sustainability push. Another driver for the aerospace industry currently for all the technologies, what we are working on is on the digital, right? We talked about the digital. There are a lot of value creation by digital technologies in the area of service and production. We were talking about having those the micro robots getting into an engine where you can't really access the engine parts to see the corrosion or the deterioration. So such things are, I think it's possible right now. So we do see a lot more coming up with the AML to AR, VR technologies are making big difference on the additive side. On the innovation, we've talked about innovation. Also, is about whether the companies are still doing an engineering surveys or producing those chief engineers. I can tell you that there's a lot of difference. If I see the early 2000s, we all started as an engineering outsourcing. The simple, low complex work was sent here. But over the time, the engineers here become like a lot more confident with the exposures with the global OEMs have given. And I can tell you, we have the global chief engineers for aircraft systems engineering at Collins is from Bangalore, and that person does the global role for across the Collins, right? I'm sure we have such examples in like Subseas and other OEMs too. But these all, I think these are like, I would say it's a natural progression, right? We have about 20-25 years of existence of the global OEMs here. It's a natural progression. How do we really accelerate that? What is the catalyst for acceleration? In my earlier organization, I've been involved in some conversations, the corporates talking about, I think India market doesn't really generate any revenue for the global OEMs because we haven't seen the India market really opening up, aviation market really opening up for larger aircraft orders and such things, maybe 10 years back. Probably now, I think such catalysts are coming up, right? We talked about many orders from Indigos and Tatas. That is going to be a big boost for building up this ecosystem, including that is going to drive a lot more IP creation and a lot more ownership in India for those OEMs. And I do see that India is prominently becoming top 2 or 3 countries across a global corporation like Collins or Raytheon Technologies. So that's a big positive news. We can develop the ecosystem and create a lot more IPs in India. The one other thing is this one major question we all ask with the industry leaders within the commercial aerospace is, when is this next NPI going to come in, right? We used to have mountains of NPIs a decade back, and we don't have any right now. All are certified and are successfully running. At least I don't foresee that maybe another next 5 years at least we don't see any NPI. At the same time, there's a lot of order backlog for those aircrafts, whether it is the single aisle or the large aircrafts. It's a lot of order backlog, and this focus on more production on the services at the moment. So if you have to really leverage the aerospace ecosystem to develop the Indian aerospace ecosystem to the next level, I think we need to really focus on how do we invest on those modern manufacturing. I think that's the need of now. We have been having conversations about the dual sourcing, right? After this Russia-Ukraine conflict come up, every company is thinking about dual sourcing, and India is prominently there in their strategy, but it is not there in reality. So we have been kind of floating a lot of RFQs, but we don't really get that level of response from the Indian supply chain yet, right? With the scale and quality, what they're looking at, the agility, it's not there yet, right? If you really want to invest on them, maybe you need to focus on those modern manufacturing, which is suitable for the aerospace. And the second one is the services. When we talk to likes of Indigos and Air Indias, one of the major problems is that we don't have those MROs here in India prominently, right? So they have to rely on Singapore, Malaysia, or go to Dubai. That's another area. We can really create more and more MROs and then service shops which can cater to needs of this increasing fleet size in India. So if we leverage that wisely, probably that would really create that platform required for us to do like fascinating things like the drone technologies and urban air mobility and all those things. Maybe the next wave of things, I would say, but the current wave is all about production and manufacturing. And then
I think I'm going to just have everybody focus, maybe Shashi to just continue on what he's in his talk, but let others also actually chip in on what do we do about enriching the talent pool that's required for all of this stuff, right? That's, I think, one of the last parting shots that we would like to hear everybody know. I'm not specifying any one particular person, but somebody can actually put up their hands if they want to talk right away.
So I think I will conclude on the talent, Professor Satya. I think it's a big time challenge. Last 1 year, everyone is losing, everyone is hiring, right? We don't know where people are going, but it's a major challenge for us. Yeah, that's a major challenge. Yeah,
people are just going around. But what about the new talent, right? I think Vipul actually listed a few challenges on why we are not able to actually attract a lot of talent. But what are the other possibilities? I think Uma had a hand raised.
Yeah. So first is
Please go ahead.
I see many hands. So okay, I'll just make 2 points. I think there is a danger of softwareization of aerospace industry, in the sense everybody would just want to come to air-conditioned offices and just do some simulations, and that's a real problem, because aerospace industry needs a lot of practical knowledge. So going to shop floor, designing stuff, testing stuff. So we must include that and do various things to inspire the engineers to really pursue serious aerospace career. Number one. Second thing is, I think we must have a collaboration among industry, academia, and also government, so that we can bring in, all the different elements, so that we can develop the future capabilities and skills.
Dwarka?
I first would like to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would like to really second what Sai said. Really, I think the manufacturing, would be a real opportunity, and we need to really bring people. And today, one of the challenges, even simple things we may not be talking about, is manufacturing engineering. For example, that's a big challenge in the country. Really, and then there are blue-collar workers, the manufacturing. And this I also see because many of the global OEMs who are present in India are also in engineering. They're doing engineering services. Very few, like Collins, probably are doing manufacturing, and some others as well, doing manufacturing. So that way, that's one of the key things, we need to talk about. The second thing is that how do we really retain all the aerospace graduates to work in aerospace? So this is one thing which we, many of them are going, because everybody in the street, as Uma was saying, they are happy to go and do a 6 months programming course and get 30,000 job and then go for it, rather than the longer term. And how do you really retain the people, to get to do that and do that? Last part, I go back because I'm working very closely on this subject, is that how do we really ensure that we have people ready for the industry for the new manufacturing techniques? And how do we collaborate between university and industry? There is lots which are being done. Professor Satya, you're working with DHI and others, but really, how do we, do that? How do we not bring back manufacturing? How do we bring manufacturing? There is an initiative in the US to bring back manufacturing. How do we really make that as a sexy subject, back, on foray? That's not the case, today. That's the way we need to.
I think I'll have to let you give the last word, because we are actually didn't realize that we're actually getting out of time.
I think it's a great, I should say, panel. So its time is something which is not will be overlooked. Quick answer: 2 things on the academy front. We have to encourage more of test, try, and fail. So don't shy away from failing. So test and more trials. That is one thing. Second, that will encourage R&D. The second point is more of academia and industry interactions, which is completely, I should say, zero when we talk about while they are in the college and interaction. They have to spend time. We should copy Germany models. That's it. To you. Back to you.
Good point. I think that is probably a good takeaway for GTX. Right. So I think you got some points to do, right, from what we need to do for the younger generation to follow up on all the challenges that have been thrown up by all the experienced people out here. I think I would like to stop here. We have 2 minutes past time, so it's probably good time to stop. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor. I'm sure, this is such a vast, subject and topic that, 2 hours certainly is not enough for us to, talk at large. We will come back to you with more such, sessions in the future. So we will put all of you together on a group so that the dialogue continues and the discussion actually continues. There's a WhatsApp group if you intend to kind of join that. There's also a LinkedIn group known as Technology Game Changers, where you have technology leaders from other technology areas as well. So it'll be great for you to kind of join there and contribute and also learn from the rest of the industry leaders. It was indeed wonderful having all of you and listening into some of the great stuff that's actually happening and some of the challenges and how we can kind of be able to circumvent those ones. A lot of work for all of us to do. I think, in the near future, hopefully we will take one thing at a time and be able to solve them. Thank you indeed. We'll come back to you also with the talent piece. Like I mentioned, we are a global platform enabling companies in India to look at talent across global tech hubs. So if you're looking at talent from other global tech hubs, we are the people. We'll come back to you on that in a little while. Thank you very much indeed. Have a wonderful day ahead.